What you're about to hear is a story the palace never wanted you to know. A story of rivalry, of betrayal, of decades of restraint that suddenly erupted in a single thunderclap moment when Princess Anne, the daughter most like Queen Elizabeth herself, stripped Camilla of her fragile grip on power. This isn't just a headline, it is the unraveling of a monarchy from the inside out. But before we dive into this gripping account of how Anne executed a move so shocking, so unprecedented, that even Parliament was forced to take her side, I want you to stop for a second and do one thing. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel right now. We're going to walk through secrets, letters, and confrontations that most people have never heard of. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next in this royal saga. Hit that subscribe button, because the truth about the House of Windsor is only getting darker, and you're going to want to be here when the next revelation drops. Now, let's step into the halls of Buckingham Palace. It happened in an instant. A single announcement whispered through the corridors spread like a storm, leaving shockwaves behind it. Princess Anne had officially seized control of royal protocol, effectively stripping Camilla of her influence and her carefully built authority. It wasn't ceremonial, it wasn't symbolic, it was absolute. Anne had done what no one thought possible. She had dethroned Camilla's power without ever laying a hand on the crown. Almost immediately, the shift was felt. Courtiers who once bowed their heads toward Camilla turned away. Staff who once asked for her approval bypassed her. Even members of the royal family, who had tolerated her presence for decades, suddenly stopped deferring to her. Camilla went from queen consort to isolated guest in her own palace, humiliated and surrounded by silence. It was the kind of downfall that doesn't happen in weeks or months, it happened overnight. And the public? They didn't weep for her, far from it. Crowds outside the gates and across the country applauded Anne's boldness. For them, Anne was not just a royal, she was the echo of Queen Elizabeth herself, a woman of discipline, restraint, and an unyielding sense of duty. For years, Camilla had been a symbol of scandal, of personal comfort outweighing national responsibility. Now, with one stroke, Anne had restored the monarchy's dignity, at least in the eyes of the people. But here's what almost no one realized. Anne's move wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a sudden burst of anger or emotion. This was strategy. This was decades in the making. Anne had carried her mother's legacy on her shoulders ever since Elizabeth's passing. She had made a vow to protect the monarchy from those who would use it for personal gain. That vow crystallized into action on the day she dethroned Camilla's influence. What gave Anne such unshakable confidence? The answer lies in the past, buried in a set of secret letters written by Queen Elizabeth herself. The world never knew about them, until now. Tucked away in the royal archives, Elizabeth had left behind a series of private letters that served almost like a hidden decree. These weren't simple words of advice to her children, they were instructions. In those pages, the Queen made it clear. Anne, and Anne alone, was to hold guardianship over royal protocol. Not Charles, not Camilla, not even William or Catherine. Anne. Elizabeth understood something most of the public didn't. She knew that protocol, the invisible glue of monarchy, wasn't just about rules of ceremony or dress codes at state dinners. Protocol was power. Whoever commanded it controlled how the crown appeared, how it behaved, how it functioned in the eyes of the world. By naming Anne as its protector, Elizabeth wasn't simply showing favoritism to her daughter. She was deliberately locking Camilla out of power, and that's where the philosophies clashed. On one side, you had Anne, who embodied sacrifice, a lifetime of duty, and a refusal to bend under the weight of personal ambition. On the other side, Camilla, who represented comfort, personal indulgence, and the idea that the monarchy could bend itself around the desires of those who wore its titles. These two visions of monarchy were oil and water. They could never coexist, and for decades the tension simmered beneath the surface, quiet but undeniable. The breaking point came in a private showdown behind palace doors. Accounts from those close to the confrontation described the air as suffocating, as though centuries of family history were pressing into that single room. Camilla demanded recognition. She insisted protocol should bend to the reality of her position as queen consort. But Anne refused. Her words cut sharper than steel. Protocol is not yours to bend. With that, the verdict was delivered. Camilla had lost. But Anne didn't stop there. She knew private words weren't enough. For the monarchy to survive, this battle had to be taken out of the shadows and into the light of formal authority. And so she turned to Parliament. What followed stunned even the most seasoned politicians. A formal decree was issued, one that stripped Camilla of any control over royal protocol and named Princess Anne as its sole guardian. With Parliament's weight behind her, Anne's authority became untouchable. It was no longer just a family squabble, it was law. The fallout inside the royal family was immediate and brutal. King Charles found himself trapped between loyalty to his wife and duty to his sister. William openly backed Anne, seeing in her actions a kind of justice for his mother, Diana. Harry, torn by his own exile from the family, remained conflicted, unable to pick a side. And Camilla's children? They were enraged, humiliated, furious that their mother had been brought so low before the world. For the first time in decades, the family itself was split in ways that could not be smoothed over with photo ops or rehearsed statements. Anne had redrawn the lines of power inside Buckingham Palace, and nothing would ever be the same. But while Camilla licked her wounds, Anne was already looking ahead. She wasn't content to simply win the battle. She was preparing for the next generation, laying the groundwork for Catherine to rise as the future defender of duty. Yet even in this apparent victory, the seeds of the next betrayal were being sown. Anne's victory was decisive, but the monarchy is never a place of permanent triumph. The palace walls may be made of stone, but the power inside them is fragile, always shifting, always at risk of collapse. And while Anne had won the right to guard protocol, the question lingered: at what cost? For Camilla, the humiliation was unbearable. Just weeks earlier, she had commanded deference from staff, courtiers, even members of the family. Now, those same figures walked past her as if she were invisible. The elaborate machinery of royal life, secretaries, equerries, ladies-in-waiting, no longer answered to her voice. What was once hers by influence vanished like mist under Anne's command. Camilla had been silenced without being decrowned, a far crueler fate than a simple abdication could ever bring. And the public saw it all. Newspapers called it the restoration of duty. Commentators praised Anne as the last living embodiment of her mother's iron legacy. Crowds outside Windsor and Buckingham began to cheer her name, carrying placards with messages like "Duty before desire" and "Elizabeth's daughter rises." Where Camilla had long been a symbol of scandal and discomfort for the monarchy, Anne became a symbol of dignity reborn. But this adoration wasn't just about Anne's moment of boldness, it was about what she represented. For decades, the public had watched the monarchy wobble under personal drama, leaks, and betrayal. Anne's action told them that discipline still lived inside the palace. She wasn't just protecting the monarchy from Camilla, she was protecting it from decay itself. And yet, even as applause rang through the country, Anne knew the monarchy was not united. The split inside the family was deepening by the day. Charles, torn between blood and marriage, began withdrawing from decisions he should have led. In private, sources say he grew resentful, quietly brooding that his reign had been overshadowed by his sister's strength. His silence only widened the cracks. William, by contrast, found clarity in the chaos. To him, Anne's move was justice, not only for the institution but for Diana, whose life had been scarred by Camilla's rise. His support was unwavering, and his alliance with Anne became the foundation for what she hoped would be a new era of duty carried forward by Catherine as his queen. Harry's role was far more complicated. His distance from the family left him both free from the conflict and haunted by it. Some say he sympathized with Camilla's humiliation. Others suggest he secretly admired Anne's discipline. But his refusal to declare a side only deepened his estrangement, leaving him stranded between two worlds. And Camilla's children, Tom and Laura, could not forgive. To them, Anne's actions weren't noble, they were vindictive. They saw their mother stripped of dignity in front of the world and vowed quietly, bitterly, that retribution would come in time. Their rage became the first flicker of the betrayal Anne's advisors warned her about, that every royal victory plants the seed of the next downfall. Anne may have secured control of protocol, but she also unleashed something far darker, a chain of rivalries that could one day bring the entire institution crashing down. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere grew colder with each passing week. What had once been a court carefully balanced between tradition and compromise now tilted entirely toward Anne's vision. State dinners, formal events, even the smallest ceremonies began to reflect her iron grip on protocol. Every bow, every dress code, every seating arrangement bore her imprint. It was as if Queen Elizabeth herself had returned through her daughter, restoring order to a house that had drifted. But with every new rule enforced, Camilla's isolation deepened. She wandered halls that once echoed with deference to her presence, now filled only with whispers behind her back. Invitations ceased. Her counsel went unheard. She had not lost the crown on her head, but she had lost the crown in people's hearts. And in monarchy, that is the greater loss. The schism inside the family widened. Charles, unable to reconcile his wife's humiliation with his sister's triumph, often avoided the very discussions he was meant to lead as king. Anne's authority in protocol cast a long shadow, making him appear hesitant, diminished, and uncertain. Where a monarch should project strength, Charles projected silence. And silence in the monarchy is a kind of death. William, by contrast, flourished under Anne's rise. His alignment with her was no accident. In Anne, he saw a protector of the vision his grandmother had once instilled in him, and in her mentorship of Catherine, he saw the blueprint for the monarchy's survival. Catherine began stepping into public roles with even more polish and precision, each one crafted under Anne's guidance. Behind the scenes, the bond between aunt and niece-in-law tightened into something resembling a succession plan, not for the crown, but for the spirit of duty itself. Harry, watching from afar, remained the great uncertainty. His hesitation to choose a side meant he was both excluded and yet constantly discussed. To some courtiers, his silence suggested guilt. To others, it was cowardice. And to Anne, it was a loose thread, a reminder that no matter how carefully she rewove the monarchy's fabric, there were always strands threatening to unravel. And then there was the rage simmering from Camilla's children. They never forgave Anne's ruthless efficiency, nor the public humiliation that followed. Tom and Laura saw their mother stripped of reverence, her legacy shattered. They believed Anne's actions were not just about protocol, but about revenge, about punishing their family line for sins rooted decades in the past. Quietly, away from cameras, they began to plot influence of their own, whispering to allies in society and press networks that Anne's power grab was dangerous, authoritarian, even tyrannical. What no one yet realized was that Anne's apparent victory was the beginning of a longer war. In securing herself as guardian of protocol, she had painted a target on her back. For every supporter who cheered her name, an enemy was sharpening their knives in silence. And so the monarchy, once shaken by Camilla's rise, now stood on the brink of a new battlefield. It wasn't just about two women anymore. It was about the entire family, the legacy of Elizabeth, and whether Anne's vow of discipline could withstand the betrayals already gathering like storm clouds on the horizon. The conclusion of this chapter is not an ending, it is a warning. Princess Anne may have secured her authority, but the monarchy is never a fortress of certainty. It is a living organism, fragile and easily fractured, and every act of consolidation plants the seed of rebellion. With Camilla's authority gone, Anne turned her focus toward the future. She did not bask in victory, nor did she soften her grip. Instead, she began reshaping the monarchy's direction with precision, placing Catherine at the center of her long-term vision. Anne believed that if the institution was to survive the next century, it needed not just heirs but guardians of duty, individuals who embodied sacrifice and discipline above personal ambition. Catherine, polished and steady, became her chosen apprentice. This move did more than prepare the next generation. It established a philosophy that would ripple through the entire royal family. For Anne, the monarchy wasn't about crowns and jewels, it was about unbroken continuity, about protecting the integrity of the crown from those who might bend it for comfort or personal gain. And yet, Even as she mentored Catherine, she knew the danger, because in the monarchy, every triumph creates a wound, and every wound eventually festers into betrayal. Behind the palace walls, the fractures remained. Charles's silence and hesitation eroded his image. William's alliance with Anne grew stronger, but also painted him as partisan in a family meant to embody unity. Harry's distance became a wound that refused to heal, while Camilla's children fanned their resentment into quiet, vengeful whispers. To the public, however, Anne's rise appeared unshakable. They saw her as the living echo of Elizabeth II, the last royal who truly put duty above all else. Crowds chanted her name, commentators praised her discipline, and newspapers framed her as the rightful guardian of the monarchy's moral compass. Yet history teaches us this: the louder the applause, the sharper the betrayal waiting in the shadows. The story of Anne and Camilla is not merely one of victory and humiliation. It is the story of a monarchy at war with itself, torn between two visions that cannot coexist. One rooted in sacrifice and discipline, the other in comfort and ambition. Anne's triumph over Camilla is written now into the annals of royal history, but it also marks the beginning of an even darker struggle. Because in the House of Windsor, power is never truly won, it is only borrowed, and when the moment comes to pass it on, the same walls that cheered your name will echo with whispers of your downfall. And so, the question lingers: has Anne saved the monarchy, or has she only delayed its inevitable collapse?